No one really believes in fate, not until it sits down beside them on a crowded plane, breathing the same recycled air, waiting for turbulence that has nothing to do with the weather. Maya Robinson didn't believe either. At 37, she believed in things that made sense: deadlines, rent checks, and her daughter's bedtime stories. Fate, to her, was just what people said when they couldn't explain their choices. But that belief began to unravel 32 minutes after takeoff. The plane hummed in the dim gold of cabin light, a lullaby of metal and motion. Maya sat in 18B, her daughter Layla asleep against her arm, tiny fingers curled around a stuffed rabbit. Outside the window, the sky bruised itself into twilight. She could still smell lilies from her mother's funeral in her coat. Grief had a scent. She'd learned something between soil and fading perfume. The man beside her hadn't spoken a word since boarding. White, late 30s maybe, quietly composed. He wore a dark sweater, no logo, no watch that flashed money, just a silver scar near his knuckle that caught the overhead light whenever he turned a page of his magazine. He wasn't fidgety like the others. He sat as if stillness was something he'd practiced. Maya hadn't planned to talk to anyone. The week had hollowed her out. Her mother's death, the endless condolences, the exhaustion of being both daughter and mother, it all left her heavy with silence. Then, from 2 rows behind, came the voice. Low, wet, arrogant. Bet that perfume smells even better on skin, the man said. Maya froze. Her chest tightened. The words didn't sound drunk worse. They sounded entitled. She kept her eyes forward, tried to breathe through it. Come on, sweetheart, he murmured. Closer now. Turn around. Be nice. She felt the faint brush of fingers at the back of her seat. That small, greasy contact lit a spark of panic under her ribs. Her first instinct was to shrink, to make herself smaller, invisible. Years of being a black woman, in spaces that demanded politeness, had trained her to swallow discomfort. But then she saw Layla's small hand twitch in sleep beside her, and something hard inside her said no more. Please don't touch me, Maya said, her voice steady but quiet. A pause. Then the sound of a laugh, low, mocking, like he was testing how far he could go. That's when the man beside her moved. He didn't glance at her first, didn't even sigh. He simply unbuckled his seatbelt, rose, and turned with the precision of someone who had spent years calculating the exact distance between calm and violence. Sir, he said, voice quiet but edged with steel. You need to stop. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Hey, relax, the man behind them said, his tone thick with smugness. Just talking, then talk to yourself. The stranger replied. His posture wasn't aggressive, just steady. One hand rested lightly on the seat in front of Maya, not shielding her, but marking space. Territory. The harasser smirked. Who the hell do you think you are? The stranger tilted his head slightly, as if deciding whether to answer. Then, in a tone that didn't need to rise, he said, the last person you want to test at 30,000 feet. The words were quiet, almost gentle, but they landed like a blade. Minutes later, the flight attendant appeared. Whispers rippled through the cabin. The man behind them was escorted away, muttering under his breath. The plane exhaled. Maya sat very still, her heart hammering. The stranger rebuckled his seatbelt. No hero's grin. No, you're safe now. Just stillness. Maya turned to him. Her lips trembled before her voice found itself. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded once. You shouldn't have to say that. She studied him. This stranger with the eyes that seemed to hold both focus and fatigue. His gaze was forward, scanning the aisle, yet part of him seemed elsewhere, some other room, some other night. "I'm Maya," she said finally. He turned, met her eyes. "Alex." No last name, no explanation, just a simple offering of truth. And though she didn't know it, the worst and best parts of her life had just intersected at seat 18B. For a while, the hum of the engines filled the space where conversation should have been. Maya adjusted Layla's blanket, feeling the tremor still running through her fingertips. The adrenaline drained slowly, leaving behind a strange ache. She glanced sideways at him again. He hadn't relaxed. His shoulders remained squared, gaze sharp, muscles alive beneath the calm exterior. "You do that often?" she asked quietly. He didn't turn. "What save people?" A corner of his mouth lifted, almost imperceptibly. "Not lately." Something in the way he said it made her chest tighten. The rest of the flight stretched out like the pause between heartbeats. Outside, the stars blurred through the window silver dust over the dark. Layla murmured in her sleep, and Maya smoothed her hair, whispering words she no longer remembered learning. Comfort, habit, love, all the same thing in that moment. Alex finally spoke again, voice low. "She's yours. My daughter, Layla. She's a good sleeper. She trusts planes more than people," Maya said. He gave a quiet laugh, brief and real. It startled her. "She's lucky," he said after a beat. "You didn't freeze." Maya blinked. "Excuse me. When he touched your seat, you spoke up." "I had to. Most people don't," he said simply. She wanted to ask him how he knew that, but something in his expression stopped her. That gaze, the kind that had seen too much, was not meant for small talk. Still, her curiosity stirred. "You military?" He paused, as if debating the right answer. "Once," he said finally. "Once." She echoed, past tense. He turned to her then, eyes the color of cold steel under sunlight. "Let's say I retired early." The flight attendant dimmed the cabin lights. The world shifted to amber shadows and whispers. Maya leaned back, closed her eyes, but her mind replayed the moment, the voice behind her. The fear, the quiet command of the man beside her. And beneath all that, a question pulsed softly. Why did his calm feel so familiar? Like the silence before grief. Later, when turbulence rippled through the cabin, Maya's hand tightened unconsciously on the armrest. Alex noticed. Without looking, he murmured, "Breathe. Don't fight it." The plane steadied. Her breath did too. She turned her head slightly. "You always this calm, no?" he said, a hint of dry humor. "I've just been through worse storms." The words sounded metaphorical, but something in his tone said they weren't. They landed in silence after that, an easy, tentative silence that held the weight of something unnamed. Outside, the night sky thickened into cloud. The pilot's voice came through the speakers, apologetic, due to severe weather over the East Coast. "We'll be diverting to Nebraska Regional for an unscheduled stop." Groans rose around them. Maya sighed. Layla stirred, but didn't wake. Alex looked toward the window, assessing something only he could see. "We'll be fine," he said. Maya managed a small smile. "You sound like someone who knows." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I just want you to believe it." For a moment, she didn't see the stranger beside her. She saw steadiness, quiet, warmth, things she hadn't known she missed. When the wheels touched down on the snow-coated runway, the cabin filled with that restless rustle of inconvenience. Phones buzzed. People complained. Maya stayed still. Her exhaustion was bone deep. "Layla," she whispered, brushing a curl from her daughter's face. "We have to get off for a bit. Baby." Alex stood, lifted her suitcase before she could protest. "You're carrying enough," he said, and there was no arrogance in it, just recognition. She wanted to argue, but she didn't. As they stepped into the terminal, a small panini in the fluorescent space that smelled like coffee and cold air, Maya felt something shift. Maybe it was gratitude, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the unfamiliar comfort of being seen without needing to perform strength. Alex walked beside her, quiet, scanning the room out of habit. She realized then that he wasn't just watchful, he was guarding something. Not her himself. He sat down across from her and finally met her eyes. "You should try to rest. They'll figure out the weather soon." She nodded, though she knew she wouldn't sleep. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The storm outside thickened against the glass, wind howling like something alive. Maya watched the flakes blur into streaks, each one vanishing the moment it touched the window. She wondered if fate was like that, momentary, fragile, only visible in motion. Alex closed his eyes, head resting back, but his jaw was still tight, even in stillness. He looked like a man waiting for orders that would never come again. And for the first time since her mother's funeral, Maya felt something other than grief. It was small, dangerous, and entirely human, the beginning of wanting to know him. Outside, the snowstorm raged harder, and in that quiet, sealed space between destinations, the world felt suspended. Fate, it turned out, didn't always crash into you. Sometimes, it simply sat beside you, reading a magazine, waiting for you to look up. The landing came like a sigh through steel, a sudden descent, the plane's belly trembling against a white storm that blurred the runway into nothing. When the wheels touched down, there was that pause, an intake of collective breath, before relief spread through the cabin in small, shaky laughter. Maya didn't laugh. Her hands were still clenched on Layla's blanket, her pulse echoing in her wrists. Outside the window, Nebraska was a ghost white horizon swallowing the world whole. They were told it would be temporary, an emergency landing, a few hours, a storm to outwait. But as Maya stepped onto the tarmac, the cold hit like a memory she hadn't agreed to recall, sharp, unforgiving, real. Alex walked beside her, suitcase in one hand, Layla's pink backpack in the other. He hadn't asked. He'd just picked it up like it was natural. She wanted to protest, but exhaustion had already negotiated her silence. The terminal was small, fluorescent, the kind of place time forgot. Coffee machines hummed like tired lungs, and a Christmas tree stood crooked near a window, its lights flickering in rebellion against the storm outside. They sat, two strangers and a sleeping child, suspended in delay. After a while, Alex said quietly, "You heading home or away?" Maya didn't look up. "Home, I guess. Whatever's left of it." His eyes softened, but he didn't offer pity, just a silence that felt like space, not avoidance. She pulled Layla closer, brushing a curl from her forehead. "My mother passed last week," she said. Not sure why she was telling him. He nodded once. No hollow condolences, just acknowledgement. Sometimes that was all grief needed witness, not words. For a long moment, the only sound was wind battering the glass. Snow fell harder now, thick flakes spinning like ash from some unseen fire. Maya's eyes drifted to Alex's hands, the roughness of his knuckles, the subtle tension in his veins, the quiet way he kept scanning the room. Every few minutes, he'd glance toward the windows, the exits, the boarding gate. It wasn't nervousness. It was vigilance. "You always this?" Aware, she asked softly. He turned to her. Half smile. Faint. Bad habit. Military. A beat. Used to be. Used to be. The way he said it, like a scar he'd learned to wear instead of hide. Maya hesitated. And now? He looked away. Now I build things. Try to make noise mean something different. She didn't press. But the contrast in him, quiet and watchful, dangerous yet gentle, pulled at something she hadn't felt in a long time. Interest. Maybe even recognition. An attendant's voice crackled over the PA system. "Due to worsening conditions, overnight accommodations are being arranged for passengers traveling with children. Please approach the desk for hotel assignments." Maya exhaled. Relief and fatigue tangled in one breath. She began to gather her things. But before she could stand, Alex had already stepped forward. "She's with me," he said to the attendant. Maya blinked. "Wait." He turned to her, tone calm but firm. "You have a kid. It's late. Let me handle this." The attendant nodded, scribbling their names. "Shuttle leaves in 10. Maya wanted to argue, but her daughter stirred in her arms, mumbling sleep-heavy words. She sighed. "You don't even know me." Alex's eyes met hers. "I know you've been carrying too much." Something inside her shifted. Not trust exactly, but the absence of fear. The shuttle ride to the hotel was slow, the road a blur of white. Layla slept against Maya's shoulder. Alex sat beside them, gaze distant, expression unreadable. Maya stole a glance at him, his profile illuminated by the bus's amber lights, his jaw tense as though he was listening to something only he could hear. When they arrived, the driver called out, "Last stop, Hampton Inn." Inside, warmth hit like mercy. The lobby glowed faintly from an old fireplace, looping its quiet hum. Couples grumbled at check-in. Someone's toddler cried. They were given a room with 2 beds. Maya hesitated, scanning the beige carpet, the neutral walls, the thin curtains shaking slightly in the wind. "I can sleep on the floor," Alex offered. "Won't bother you?" "You don't have to," she said. "Neither do you," he replied. And for the first time that night, she almost smiled. Later, when Layla was tucked in and the room dimmed to soft yellow, Maya sat across from him. Between them, a lamp cast a slow orbit of light. Outside, the storm painted the glass with shifting white. "Why'd you do it?" she asked quietly. He looked up from where he sat on the edge of his bed. "Do what? Step in on the plane?" He hesitated. "Would you have wanted me not to?" "That's not what I meant," she said. "You didn't even know me." He studied her, then turned toward the window. "Because I do know that kind of silence," he said finally. "The kind where everyone sees something wrong and does nothing." There it was, the crack in his calm, not guilt. Memory. Maya watched him, the reflection of snowlight flickering over his face. "That happened to you?" He nodded once. "A long time ago. Someone paid for it." "Who?" He didn't answer. His jaw set. his hand curling into a loose fist. Maya's chest tightened, sensing pain older than war, sharper than regret. After a while, she said softly, "You can't save everyone." His eyes lifted to hers, steady, blue as winter. "No," he said, "but I can try not to fail the next one." The room fell quiet again, but it wasn't empty. Something unspoken stretched between them, fragile yet pulsing with the awareness of two people who'd forgotten what it felt like to be understood. Time moved strangely that night. Maya sat awake long after Alex turned off the light. Layla's soft breathing filled the silence, a rhythm that steadied her heart. She stared at the ceiling, tracing faint patterns in the dimness. She thought of her mother, how she'd always said, "There's kindness in stillness." Maya. Learn to see it before it's gone. She hadn't understood then. Now she did. Across the room, Alex's silhouette was barely visible, but she could tell he wasn't sleeping either. The way his shoulders moved with each breath gave him away. Maya wondered what haunted him when the lights went out. At some point, fatigue won. Her last memory before sleep was of snow swirling outside the window, endless and soft, as if the world were erasing its edges for one fragile night. She woke to silence. Morning had arrived without warning, pale and cold. Alex was gone. For a second, panic flared irrational, sudden. Then she saw it, a folded note on the nightstand. Went to check flight updates. Coffee downstairs. Simple. But her heartbeat didn't slow right away. She rose quietly, pulled on her coat, and peeked through the window. The storm had eased. Sky washed clean to a quiet silver. Nebraska in morning looked like an afterthought, a blank page. Layla stirred, stretching, mumbling for pancakes. Maya smiled faintly. "We'll find some," she whispered. Downstairs. She found him near the window, 2 paper cups of coffee waiting. His hair was still damp from snow, his sweater dusted with flakes that hadn't melted yet. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, sitting opposite him. They didn't speak for a while. The air smelled of burnt toast and cheap roast, the kind of scent that belonged to nowhere. Finally, Maya asked, "You always travel alone?" "Usually." "Why?" He stared into his coffee. "I used to think solitude was strength. Turns out it's just a quieter kind of fear." Her throat tightened at that. She knew exactly what he meant. "Maybe it's both," she said. "Strength and fear." He looked at her then. Really looked like he was memorizing something he wasn't sure he'd see again. When the airport finally reopened, passengers hurried to board the shuttle back. Alex helped Maya with Layla's things, as though it had become routine. At the door, she paused, turning to him. "You didn't have to stay with us." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." There was no charm in it, no agenda. Just truth. Spare and disarming. For a heartbeat. Neither of them moved. Then Layla tugged at her sleeve, and the spell broke. They walked out into the brittle air, snow crunching underfoot, wind carving halos around their steps. The world was still white, still waiting to thaw. But something in Maya had already begun to melt. As they boarded the shuttle, Alex glanced once more at the horizon, a quiet, unmarked stretch of land, and said, almost to himself, "Funny thing about storms, they reroute you. But sometimes you end up exactly where you were supposed to be." Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. She just looked out the window, watching the last of Nebraska disappear behind them, not knowing that the real turbulence was yet to come. Night settled slow and heavy over the Nebraska hotel, pressing its quiet against the windows. The snow outside had softened into a steady whisper, like the sound of a memory trying not to wake anyone. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, her daughter's small form curled beneath a blanket of cartoon clouds. Layla's breath rose and fell in a rhythm that felt almost holy, safe, untouched by the grief that hung in the room like an uninvited guest. Across from her, Alex sat in the dim light, elbows resting on his knees, eyes distant. The lamp between them threw a thin line of gold across his face, cutting through the shadows. For a long time, neither spoke. The kind of silence that feels fragile if you breathe too loud. It might shatter. Then, without looking up, Alex said quietly, "Afghanistan." Maya frowned, unsure if he was talking to her or to himself. What about it? He exhaled, slow, deliberate. That's where I learned that a single minute can change everything. She didn't interrupt. She knew that tone, the one that only comes when someone is finally ready to speak after years of not. There was a village. He continued. We had intel about a raid. I hesitated just for confirmation, just for orders. 1 minute too long. He paused. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm outside. When we got there, a woman was gone. Civilians. Kids. His jaw tightened. She was 23. A translator. The kind of brave that makes soldiers look small. Maya felt her throat close. She died. He nodded once. No tears. Just a quiet confession. A scar turned inside out. It wasn't your fault, she said, softly but firmly. Alex let out a dry laugh. One without humor. That's the thing about command. Fault stops being a question. It becomes a name. Maya's heart clenched. She wanted to reach across the distance between them, but something held her still, fear maybe, or respect for the weight he carried. Do you still dream about her? He looked at her then, eyes pale as frost. Every time silence lasts too long. For a while, the only sound was Layla's steady breathing. Maya turned toward the window, snow swirling in faint spirals outside. It reminded her of the mornings after her mother's chemo treatments, quiet, endless, suspended between hope and surrender. I know that kind of silence, she said finally. The kind that waits for you in the dark. He studied her. What do you see when it finds you? The ceiling, she said, smiling faintly. And then the drop. Like I'm falling. But no one's looking up. Alex nodded, like he understood too well. Layla's father, he asked after a pause, voice careful, respectful. Maya hesitated. She could lie, deflect, make it easy, but something about his honesty deserved hers. He left, she said, before she was born. Did he know? He knew. Her voice caught slightly, then steadied. He said he wasn't ready. I said I'd do it anyway, and I did. Alex leaned back, watching her. You've been alone since then. She shrugged. I've been busy surviving. There wasn't much room for anything else. He smiled faintly. Still, you stood your ground. I didn't have a choice. He looked at her for a long moment, the air between them dense with unspoken things. That's what people say when they've done something extraordinary and don't want to admit it. She let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. You're not very good at small talk, are you? I skipped that class. Maya shook her head, smiling despite herself. Figures. The conversation drifted, light at first, about travel, about how Nebraska felt like a forgotten corner of the country. But beneath every word was the quiet awareness of something larger building between them. Alex wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was a mirror held up to her own solitude, reflecting pieces she hadn't looked at in years. At one point, his gaze drifted toward Layla again. "She's strong," he said. "She's 5. Maya replied softly. "But sometimes she feels older than me." He nodded, eyes thoughtful. "Maybe strength skips generations." Maya looked at him, wondering how someone could say something so gentle with a face built for war. Later, when the lights dimmed and the storm quieted, Alex rose and walked toward the window. His reflection merged with the falling snow, ghostly, unreal. "Do you ever feel," he said, voice low, "like life kept going but forgot to take you with it?" The question startled her, not because of its strangeness, but because she'd thought it herself so many times. "Yes," she whispered. "Every day since my mother got sick." He turned slightly, his profile etched against the glass. "Grief's a funny thing. It tricks you into thinking you're still part of the story. But really, you're just rereading the same page." She stood then, crossing to him, close enough to see the flecks of light in his eyes, the small scar near his temple. "Maybe," she said, "the only way forward is to write something new." For a second, it felt like the world stopped spinning, just her breath and his. Just two people caught between what they'd lost and what they might dare to hope for. Then Layla stirred in her sleep, the sound breaking the spell. Maya stepped back, almost embarrassed by how near she'd come to something she couldn't name. Alex didn't move. His voice, when it came, was quieter. "You should sleep. So should you." He smiled faintly. "I'll keep watch." She didn't ask what from. She already knew. Maya lay awake long after turning off the light. The room smelled faintly of coffee and snowmelt. Somewhere in the distance, a truck passed, its sound fading into the night. She thought about what he'd said, how a single minute could change everything. She wondered if this was one of those minutes. Her mind flickered through the last few years, her mother's fading laughter, Layla's first cry, the empty space on the couch where someone else's shoes should have been. And now this, a stranger who carried his pain like a compass, who looked at her, not with pity, but with recognition. She wasn't sure what it meant yet, but it felt like standing on the edge of something that might finally break her open again, near dawn. The storm passed. Light filtered through the thin curtains, pale and hesitant. Maya rose quietly and saw Alex still awake, sitting by the window. His posture was the same, alert but calm. "You didn't sleep," she said. He shook his head. "Didn't need to." "Liar." He glanced at her, a faint grin breaking the fatigue. "Maybe." They stood there for a while, side by side, watching the snow sparkle in the early light. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" she asked suddenly. "To before?" She nodded. "No," he said after a pause, "because then I wouldn't have learned what not to be." Maya looked at him, eyes soft. "And what's that?" Someone who let silence win. Something in the way he said it made her chest ache. She understood him too well, and that frightened her. When the shuttle horn sounded from outside, Layla woke, blinking sleep from her eyes. "Morning. Sunshine," Maya murmured, smoothing her daughter's curls. Alex turned, watching them with an expression that was neither smile nor sorrow, something in between. Maya caught his gaze and held it. "You always save strangers." He considered that. "Maybe I don't save them." Maybe they just remind me there's still something worth standing up for. She didn't respond. Didn't need to. Outside. The sun had finally broken through the storm. It glittered over the untouched snow. Blinding. Beautiful. And unbearably temporary. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave, Maya realized that whatever this was, whatever had begun between them, it wasn't over. Not yet. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of exhaustion and grief, a small, dangerous thought whispered, maybe fate doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it just walks beside you in silence, waiting for the next breath. Morning came soft and silver, the kind of light that feels like forgiveness after too much night. Maya opened her eyes to quiet, the hum of the heater, the faint whistle of wind against the window. Layla was still asleep, a warm tangle of curls and dreams. Across the room, Alex was awake, already dressed, sitting by the window as if he'd been waiting for the dawn. For a moment, she just watched him. The way he sat, shoulders straight, yet still, as though the body obeyed a discipline the heart could not shake. "Morning," she said softly. He turned, and the smallest curve appeared at the edge of his mouth. Morning. The snow had stopped sometime before sunrise. Outside, Nebraska shimmered under a layer of light, pure, quiet, unscarred. It was the kind of morning that made you believe in starting over, even if you didn't deserve to. The flight out was half empty, the world still catching its breath after the storm. Layla spent most of it coloring clouds on a napkin with a borrowed pen. Maya sat by the window, trying to memorize the silence between herself and the man beside her. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was heavy, with what they weren't saying. At one point, Alex asked, "You afraid of flying?" "Not really," she said. "Just of landing in the wrong place." He smiled faintly. Sometimes that's the right one. It was the kind of response that stayed with her longer than it should have. They didn't speak again until the wheels hit New York asphalt. The city was gray, wet, impatient, already moving faster than the rest of the country. At baggage claim, the crowd pressed close. People muttered. Phones rang. Announcements blurred into the static hum of homecoming. Maya lifted Layla into her arms, trying to balance the suitcase when she felt a small hand slip out of hers. Layla had darted forward, reaching for Alex. "Bye, Uncle Soldier," the girl chirped, her voice bright enough to cut through the noise. Alex froze, then laughed a real laugh, the kind that cracked open the stoic calm he wore like armor. For a moment, the airport didn't exist. Just that sound. Maya's throat tightened. "Say, thank you, Layla." Layla waved, grinning. "Thank you." Alex crouched slightly, meeting the child's eyes. "Take care of your mom." "Okay, I already do," Layla said seriously. He smiled at that, then stood. His gaze flicked to Maya's, something unspoken passing between them. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but soft. "Don't," he replied. "Just call it fate, midair." She managed a small smile, though her heart wasn't ready for goodbyes. Then he was gone, swept into the tide of travelers, a figure in a dark coat disappearing toward the exits. Maya stood still for a moment, her pulse slowing, her mind already trying to convince her that whatever had happened between them belonged to the in-between space of airports and delays. Not real life, but some part of her refused to believe that. Days blurred after that. The city swallowed her again, the rhythm of sirens, the hiss of subways, The neon insomnia of nights that never truly end. Maya fell back into her routine mornings with Layla. Days at the hospital. Evenings spent folding laundry and keeping busy enough not to think. But she did think. About him. About the quiet in his voice when he spoke of loss. About how her daughter had laughed in his presence. A sound that hadn't been that free in months. She told herself it was nothing. Just a kind man. Just coincidence. Still, she caught herself glancing at strangers on the street, half expecting to see his face. It was a Wednesday when everything shifted again. She was on her lunch break, a styrofoam cup of soup in hand, half listening to the hospital television in the corner. The anchor's voice droned over stock footage, talk of markets, tech innovations, philanthropy. Then she heard it. Alexander Monroe, CEO of Monroe Technologies, one of the most influential private investors in the country. Maya looked up. The screen filled with his face. Alex. Same eyes. Same calm. Only this time, he wasn't the man in the hoodie sitting by her on a plane. He was in a tailored suit, stepping out of a black car, flanked by cameras. The caption read, Alexander Monroe, former Air Force officer turned tech magnate. She froze. The spoon slipped from her fingers, clattering against the plastic lid. It couldn't be coincidence. It wasn't. Her mind replayed every detail, the scars on his hands, the way he'd scanned the terminal, the calm that came from someone who'd seen chaos and lived through it. Alexander Monroe. A billionaire. A war veteran. A man who had sat beside her as if he were nobody at all. Her heart stuttered. It wasn't the wealth that stunned her. It was the deception. No, not deception. Exactly. He hadn't lied. He just hadn't told her who he was. Why would he? Because for those few hours, he could be just a man again. And she had treated him like one. Still, something inside her recoiled. There was a gulf now, invisible but vast. What could she possibly be to someone like him? That night, after Layla had fallen asleep, Maya sat on the edge of her bed, laptop open, light spilling across the sheets. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She searched Alexander Monroe. The results came: fast articles, interviews, profiles. Words like visionary, reclusive, philanthropist. But in every photo, his eyes looked the same, distant, composed, carrying the quiet weight she had seen in Nebraska. One headline caught her breath. War hero turned innovator Monroe's journey from Afghanistan to the boardroom. Afghanistan. The story aligned perfectly with the man who had whispered about a 1-minute mistake. Maya leaned back in her chair, heart racing. He hadn't told her the details, but now they filled themselves in. She thought of his words. Silence can cost someone everything. He hadn't been speaking in metaphor. The next day, she caught herself typing his name into her phone, then deleting it, typing it again, deleting it again. What would she even say? I saw you on TV. You lied about being ordinary. It sounded absurd. And yet, behind the irritation, there was something else: disappointment she couldn't justify. Because the man she'd met wasn't the billionaire on the screen. He was the one who sat awake in a small hotel room, watching over her daughter's sleep. The one who'd admitted his ghosts without asking for sympathy. Maybe that was what unsettled her most. The way he'd made her feel seen and then vanished into a world that didn't belong to her. On Friday evening, she stayed late at the hospital. A long shift, too many patients, too much noise. When she finally stepped outside, the city air bit at her cheeks. Snow again, light this time. Soft. She pulled her scarf tighter and walked toward the subway. Her thoughts tangled between anger and longing. A black car slowed beside the curb. Tinted windows. Quiet engine. For a second, she thought she imagined it. Then the window rolled down. He was there. Alex. No suit this time. Just a sweater. The same gray from the flight. His expression unreadable. But his eyes, those eyes held something like relief. Maya, he said. Her name in his voice was almost enough to undo her. She didn't move. You shouldn't be here. Probably not, he said softly. But I didn't want to be anywhere else. She shook her head. You're him, Alexander Monroe. You have what companies? Cameras. Entire worlds orbiting you. You didn't think that was worth mentioning. He sighed. I didn't want to be that man on the plane. I just wanted to be someone you didn't look at differently. And now, his gaze steadied. Now I'd rather you look at me honestly, even if it's not kindly. Maya's breath caught. The city roared around them, horns, voices, snow slush beneath tires, but it felt like the world had narrowed to the space between them. I don't know what this is, she whispered. Neither do I, he admitted. But it felt real, didn't it? She hesitated. That was the problem. It had felt real. But how real could something be when built on everything, left unsaid, Alayla's laughter on the plane, his haunted stories, the quiet safety she'd felt beside him? Maya looked away, blinking fast. I can't do this. I'm not asking you to, he said gently. I just needed you to know I wasn't pretending about that. He nodded once, as if that were enough, and the car pulled away. She stood on the sidewalk, snow settling in her hair, her pulse refusing to steady. He was gone again. But this time, he hadn't disappeared into a crowd. He'd disappeared into truth. And somehow, that hurt more. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. Layla mumbled in her dreams, whispering for her uncle soldier. Maya closed her eyes, pressing her palms to her face. The world had changed shape again, and she wasn't sure which part of it still belonged to her. But one thought lingered long after the city went quiet. What if fate hadn't made a mistake at all, had a way of softening New York? The city's edges blurred, lights smudged, footsteps muffled, the air thick with something almost forgiving. It was late afternoon when the hospital's auditorium filled with the low murmur of donors and doctors, laughter stitched between polite conversation and the faint scent of coffee. Maya stood by the registration table, pen poised over a clipboard, pretending to focus on logistics. She liked order. It kept her safe from the chaos she couldn't name. The fundraiser was for children's health programs, something she believed in. Yet today, her thoughts drifted, restless, circling around a face she hadn't seen since that night on the street, since he'd said her name as if it were a secret he wasn't supposed to keep. She told herself he was gone again, back to that other world, private jets, closed doors, men who didn't wait for permission. And then she heard it, that voice, low, steady, familiar. Dr. Robinson. She looked up, and there he was, Alex, no Alexander Monroe, the version the world knew, dressed in a black suit that fit like intention, tie a muted shade of gray, reins still clinging to his shoulders. For a heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. You shouldn't be here, she said softly, though her pulse betrayed her. Probably true, he replied, smiling faintly. But I heard the hospital was doing good work. Thought I'd see it for myself. Maya swallowed. You could have just written a check. I could have, he said. But then I wouldn't have run into the woman who once handed me coffee in a storm. Her lips parted. You remember that I remember everything, he said simply. And that was the problem. The evening unfolded in slow motion. Speeches were made. Applause echoed. Cameras flashed. Alex stayed mostly in the background. Polite, but detached. Speaking when spoken to. Maya caught him glancing her way, more than once, though he looked away before she could read what was behind those eyes. When the last donor left and the noise thinned to the whisper of rain on glass, she found him standing by the window, hands in his pockets. The city outside was a reflection, wet and trembling. You still hate small talk? She asked, walking over. He turned, that half-smile returning. You remembered. You make it sound like a confession. It is, he said. I'd rather talk about things that matter. Like what? Like why you keep pretending not to look for me in a crowd. Her breath hitched. You don't know that. He held her gaze. I do. She looked away, heat rising under her skin. You're arrogant. Maybe, he said quietly, or maybe I'm just not used to wanting to be found. The words hung between them, tender and disarming. Maya folded her arms, partly to shield herself, partly to keep from reaching out. Why are you really here, Alex? He hesitated, then said, because I couldn't forget Nebraska, or you, or how simple everything felt before names started meaning something. Maya exhaled slowly. It wasn't simple. No, he admitted, but it was real. They talked long after the janitor had begun stacking chairs. About the hospital, about Layla, her boundless energy, her love for drawing clouds, about his new foundation, an initiative for veterans' rehabilitation and children's mental health. I'm trying to do something that doesn't need to be profitable, he said. For once. Maya smiled faintly. And you need a doctor to make it look legitimate. He shook his head. I need someone who doesn't treat people like numbers. Someone who still believes care can change a life. Her pulse quickened. You're flattering me. No, he said, and his tone softened. I'm asking for your help. She studied him. His words were steady, but she could sense the vulnerability beneath them, something raw and unpolished. A man learning to rebuild himself from the inside out. And if I say no, she asked. He smiled. Just a trace. Then I'll keep finding reasons to show up until you say yes. Persistent, haunted. He corrected. For a moment, silence filled the space between them again, this time gentler, less guarded. As they walked out together, the rain had lightened to a drizzle. Streetlights turned puddles into tiny mirrors. Maya opened her umbrella, but Alex didn't. He seemed unbothered by the rain, his hair damp, his expression thoughtful. You ever notice? He said, glancing up at the gray sky, how the city smells clean after it rains, even though it's still the same city. Maybe it's not the city that changes, Maya said. Maybe it's us. He looked at her, then really looked, and for the first time, she didn't look away. Something inside her, dormant for years, stirred awake. They stopped outside the hospital entrance. You really think I can help? She asked quietly. I don't think, he said. I know. She hesitated. You barely know me, Alex. He smiled, rain sliding down the line of his jaw. I know enough. I know you stayed in Nebraska when you could have walked away. I know you carry everyone's pain and call it work. I know your daughter trusts strangers faster than you do, and I think that says something about the kind of mother you are. Her throat tightened. You've been watching me once, he said. Now I'm just trying to see you." The honesty in his voice left her breathless. For a moment, the sound of the city faded, the honking cars, the endless rain, and all she could hear was the steady beat of her heart against the quiet rhythm of his. Later that night, after she put Layla to bed, Maya stood by her window, looking down at the rain-soaked streets. She replayed every word, every glance. The way he'd looked at her, not like a man with money, but like someone searching for a reason to believe again. And against her better judgment, she smiled, because for the first time in years, hope didn't feel like a threat. Across the city, in a penthouse where light touched glass and steel, Alex sat alone at his desk. The city stretched beneath him, a constellation of noise and light. He stared at his reflection in the window, seeing not the billionaire the world wrote about, but the man who'd once hesitated for a single minute and never stopped paying for it. He thought of Maya's voice, the quiet strength in her eyes. He'd told himself he was done seeking redemption, that no amount of money or charity could erase the past. But maybe, just maybe, there were some wounds that didn't need erasing, only someone willing to see them and stay anyway. The next morning, an envelope arrived at the hospital reception. No sender, no note, just her name in clean handwriting. Inside was a folder, a proposal titled, "The Layla Project Mental Health Support for Children of Single Parents." At the bottom, a single line, handwritten in ink. "Because you once taught me that silence doesn't heal. A." Maya read it twice, her eyes stinging, not from sadness, but from the terrifying possibility of new beginnings. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world smelled clean again. She folded the letter, placed it carefully in her coat pocket, and whispered to herself, "Maybe this time." The storm left something worth keeping. The morning started like any other gray light spilling across the tiles of Maya's kitchen. The quiet hum of the coffee maker, the soft voice of Layla humming to herself as she colored at the table. Maya flipped through her phone absently, scrolling past headlines she didn't really read until one froze her in place. Monroe Tech under scrutiny. Ethical concerns emerge from classified military contract. The article was brief, but sharp. It mentioned an unresolved inquiry from Alex's time in the Air Force, linked to an overseas defense project later acquired by his company. Anonymous sources. Words like civilian casualties, cover-up, classified incident. Maya felt the world tilt slightly. She read the paragraph again, slower this time, as if repetition could change the meaning. It didn't. Her phone buzzed in her hand. "Alex, don't believe everything you read. I'll explain tonight." Her first instinct was to delete the message, to retreat into the one place she still had control distance. But her fingers hesitated over the screen. Explain what she thought. That the man who talked about truth and redemption built his empire on a lie. She put the phone face down on the counter. Her coffee had gone cold. That evening, rain returned to the city. It came down hard, angry, relentless, drumming against the windows, like it had something to prove. Maya tried to busy herself with paperwork, but her thoughts were static, circling, refusing to quiet. When the knock came, she already knew who it was. She didn't move at first. Then, slowly, she opened the door. Alex stood there, rain on his coat, hair damp, eyes darker than she remembered. "Maya," he said softly. She stepped aside. "Come in." He did. The warmth of the apartment pressed around them like a fragile shield. Layla was asleep in the next room. The silence felt too delicate to touch. He stood for a moment, searching for the right words. You saw the news. I did. It's not what it sounds like. Then what is it? She asked, crossing her arms. Because I've spent the day wondering who exactly I let into my life. Alex exhaled. Slow. It was years ago. Afghanistan. My unit was ordered to act on incomplete intel. I gave the final command. The strike hit too early. Her voice dropped, and someone died. He nodded. A child. Maya's breath caught. You said it was a translator once. He met her gaze. It was both. The words hung between them, heavy as ash. I left the service after that. He continued, tried to bury it in work, in technology, in building something useful. But you can't build high enough to outclimb a ghost. She sank into the chair behind her. Her hands were trembling, though her voice stayed level. And the company. The contracts. They were meant to make things better, he said. Drones for search and rescue. AI to prevent human error. I thought maybe if I fixed the system, I could atone for my own mistakes. Maya looked up at him then, her expression unreadable. You tried to heal the wound with the same weapon. He flinched at that barely. But enough. I didn't know the past would follow me here, he said. But I should have. That's on me. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the rain, pressing against the window in endless rhythm. Maya stared at the floor, her heart pounding in her throat. Every part of her wanted to believe him, to believe that the man who had watched over her child, who had spoken of kindness and courage, was still that man. But belief, she had learned, was dangerous. Finally, she whispered, You think silence protects people, but silence chooses a side, Alex. His voice broke slightly. I know. No, she said sharply, standing now. You don't. You think guilt is atonement. It's not. It's just another way of staying safe. He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he didn't try to defend himself. I thought I was protecting them, he said quietly. The team, the country, you. Maya's voice trembled. You can't protect someone from the truth. He nodded, the smallest motion. You're right. She turned away, pressing her palms to the table to steady herself. In the reflection of the window, she saw his figure, tall, motionless, haloed in the gray light of the storm. He looked less like a man and more like a memory already fading. I don't know what to do with this, she said finally. You don't have to do anything, he replied. You just have to know I'm not the man they're painting me as. She turned back toward him, eyes glistening. But you were that man once. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was there, unspoken, in the way his shoulders sagged, in the apology he carried like a second skin. Do you still see her? Maya asked suddenly. Who, the child? He hesitated, then nodded. Every night. She closed her eyes. The air felt too thin. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. You can't ask me to share that weight with you. I'm not asking you to, he said. I just didn't want to lie. That's the thing, she murmured. You didn't have to. The clock on the wall ticked once, then again. The sound felt unbearably loud. Finally, she took a slow breath. You should go. My eyes. He hesitated, as if the word itself had lodged somewhere inside him. Then, after a moment, he nodded. He reached for his coat, His hand brushed the doorknob. Paused. "If I could go back," he said softly, "I'd rather die in that desert than live with what I did." She looked at him, tears bright in her eyes. "That's exactly why I can't do this. Alex, you haven't forgiven yourself, and if you can't, no one else ever will." He swallowed hard. For the briefest second, he looked like he might say something else, but the words never came. He turned, opened the door. The rain swallowed him whole. When the door closed, the silence felt too large for the room. Maya sank into the chair, her face in her hands. The scent of him still lingered: rain, cedar, something faintly metallic. The air was still warm where he had stood. She could almost hear his voice. Sometimes silence costs more than speaking. And yet, here they were, two people broken open by the very thing they'd both once tried to outrun, outside. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the city. Inside. Maya whispered into the quiet. Not for him, but for herself. "I wanted to believe you." The clock ticked again, steady, unbothered. In another room, Layla turned in her sleep, murmuring for the man who had once promised to keep watch. Maya pressed her hand against her chest, where the ache felt almost physical, almost visible. She didn't cry. She just sat there, listening to the storm, waiting for the world to stop shaking. And when the rain finally eased, when the night began to soften at its edges, she realized something cruel and clear. It wasn't love that hurt most. It was hope. Hope that he could be the man she thought he was. Hope that redemption could rewrite the past. Hope that silence could somehow mean safety. And as the first light began to creep across the floor, she whispered the only truth she could hold on to. Some storms don't end with thunder. Some just leave everything quieter than before. A week passed. Enough time for silence to harden into distance. Maya had learned how to move through her days again, one patient at a time, one routine at a time. She smiled when required, spoke when necessary, and filled every spare minute with something practical so her thoughts wouldn't wander where they wanted to go. But sometimes, late at night, she'd catch herself staring at the empty chair by her window, the one where Alex used to sit, the one that still carried his ghost. She told herself she didn't miss him. She missed clarity. But even that was a lie. It was a Monday morning when she saw him again, not in person, but on every screen. The television in the hospital waiting room flashed his face. Alexander Monroe resigns as CEO of Monroe Tech. Reporters called it shocking. The footage showed him at a podium. No tie this time. His voice calm but steady. "There are things success cannot fix," he said, "and silence is one of them. I'm stepping down to focus on a foundation for psychological recovery for veterans, for children who've lived through conflict, for anyone still fighting wars the world no longer sees." The room around her buzzed with curiosity, admiration, speculation. But Maya didn't move. Her pulse was too loud in her ears. On the screen, he looked different, not untouchable, not composed, just human, stripped bare of the armor he'd worn his whole life. And for the first time since he'd left, she didn't see guilt in his eyes. She saw peace trying to find its way back. She didn't know what to do with that feeling. By Thursday, she'd almost convinced herself it didn't matter. Then, that morning, someone knocked on her door. It was early, too early for visitors. The city outside was still half asleep, gray light stretching across the narrow street. Maya opened the door cautiously, robe wrapped around her, hair undone. And there he was, Alex, No bodyguards. No cars waiting at the curb. Just him, jeans. A worn jacket. Rain still on his shoulders. For a second, they simply stared at each other, the air thick with everything left unsaid. Alex. She breathed. More exhale than word. Maya. Her heart tightened at the sound of her name in his voice. You shouldn't be here. I know. He smiled faintly. But I came anyway. Why? He hesitated, eyes softening. Because I realized there's a difference between leaving something behind and walking away from it. She folded her arms, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. And which one was I? The one I couldn't walk away from. Her chest ached. You think words fix what happened? He said quietly, but they're a place to start. She didn't invite him in. Not yet. They stood in the doorway, the cold air moving between them like a warning. Maya studied him. There was no trace of the polished billionaire who once commanded boardrooms. He looked tired, almost fragile. But there was a steadiness in him now, something grounded. I saw the news, she said. You quit. He nodded. It was time. You think that erases what came before. Nothing does. He replied. But I can live differently from now on. That's all redemption really is, the choice to stop being who you were. His words struck something deep. Maya wanted to stay angry. It was safer that way. But anger requires distance, and he was standing too close. Why come here? She asked finally. He met her eyes. Because I owe you the truth I should have given you from the start, and because I learned something from you, even when you were walking away. From me. He nodded. You showed me that strength isn't surviving alone. It's staying even when it hurts. Maya's throat tightened. And what makes you think I'll let you stay now? He gave a small, almost broken smile. Because I'm not here to win you back. I'm here to prove I can stand still. That silenced her. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, not as they had been, but as they were now, two people stripped of illusions, standing in the aftermath of everything that had shattered. Do you still see them? She asked quietly. He blinked. The ghosts, she nodded. Every day, he said. But I talk to them now. I tell them I'm sorry. And then I tell them I'm still trying. Something inside her softened, though she didn't want it to. Does it help? Not always, he admitted, but it feels honest. She exhaled. The sound trembled slightly. And what do you want from me, Alex? He took a step closer, but not too close. A chance to begin again, without lies, without armor. Not as a man with a company or a past, but as someone still learning how to live with both. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the shadow of the man she'd once feared she couldn't love, and found something gentler instead. You think it's that easy? He smiled faintly. I think it's that hard. The clock inside ticked softly. The city was waking up, footsteps outside, a child laughing in the hallway, the smell of coffee drifting from a neighbor's door. Maya's fingers tightened on the edge of the door. Every instinct screamed to protect herself, to keep the walls intact. But the thing about walls was, they kept everything out, even the light. She took a slow breath. You've changed. I'm trying to, he said. And if I let you in? He hesitated, then whispered. Then I'll spend whatever time you give me, proving I deserve it. Something in his voice, that quiet certainty, undid the last of her resistance. She stepped aside. The gesture was small, almost invisible, but it meant everything. Come in, she said softly. He entered. careful, like stepping into sacred ground. The apartment smelled of warmth and rain. A small drawing Layla had made hung on the fridge, a stick-figure family under a sun with too many rays. He paused, looking at it. "She still draws clouds?" he asked. Maya nodded. "Always. She gets that from you." She turned to him, a faint smile curving her lips. "I doubt it." "No," he said, meeting her eyes. "You just learned how to live above them." Her smile faltered slightly. There it was again, that quiet way he had of finding truth without touching the wound. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd once eaten dinner alone for years. Now, the silence between them felt different. Not the silence of distance, but of possibility. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said finally. "I'm not asking you to," he replied. "I just don't want to leave it unfinished." She looked at him for a long time. There was no arrogance now, no defense, only the steady presence of someone who had fallen, learned, and chosen to stand again. "You really did resign?" she asked softly. "Yes. I realized I'd built a life where everything worked, except me, and the foundation. It's real," he said. "I named it after her." Maya frowned. "After who?" He held her gaze. "The translator, the one I failed." She swallowed hard. "You don't owe the world that story, Alex." "I do," he said gently, "because hiding it made me less human, and she deserves better than my shame." Maya blinked back, the sting in her eyes. For a moment, the storm of the past week felt far away, replaced by something quieter, truer. "Do you want coffee?" she asked finally, almost shyly. He smiled, the smallest curve of warmth. "I'd like that." She turned toward the counter, and for the first time in a long time, her hands didn't tremble. Behind her, Alex stood near the window, looking out at the city, gray and rain-slicked, but beginning to glow with light. When she handed him the mug, their fingers brushed a brief, electric touch that said everything words couldn't. He met her eyes, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me be here." Maya exhaled, a sound that was almost a laugh. "You're not forgiven yet." "I know," he said, "but I'm home." Outside, the rain eased to a mist. Inside, the two of them sat across from each other in quiet understanding. Two lives cracked open, not to break, but to let something new grow through the fractures. And as sunlight crept through the window, touching the edge of the table between them, Maya realized something she hadn't dared believe in months. Sometimes the storm doesn't destroy what you love. Sometimes it brings it back. A year slipped by like the turning of a page, quietly, without ceremony. Autumn came back to Brooklyn, soft and golden. The air carried the smell of apples and rain, and the trees outside Maya's apartment shed their leaves like unsent letters. Life had changed, not suddenly, but with the slow persistence of seasons that no longer needed to announce themselves. Maya still worked at the hospital, though her days felt lighter now. Layla had grown taller, her laughter louder, her questions endless. And Alex had learned how to live in a quieter kind of way. He had left the boardrooms behind, sold what he didn't need, moved into a modest brownstone 3 blocks away. He spent his mornings teaching children with disabilities how to use technology, coding, storytelling, invention. He said he liked seeing their faces when something worked, when creation didn't feel like something reserved for other people. "They remind me," he'd told Maya once, "that progress isn't always about building something new. Sometimes it's just about helping someone believe they can. She hadn't answered then, but her eyes had. It was early September, when the school year began again. The morning air shimmered with the sound of backpacks unzipping, bells ringing, parents calling after their children. Maya held Layla's hand as they crossed the schoolyard. Layla bounced, eager, wearing her favorite yellow sweater. And at the far corner of the yard, Alex stood with a camera slung over his shoulder. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a worn shirt, jeans, and that same look he always wore around them, something soft, unguarded. When he saw them, he raised the camera and took a picture. Click. Layla turned, laughing. Maya tried to protest, but he only smiled. Just proof. He said, that joy exists. Later, when she saw the photograph, she understood what he meant. It wasn't perfect, her hair slightly windblown, Layla's hand mid-wave, but there was something in their faces, something raw and alive. For once, life didn't look staged. That evening, they gathered on the small porch outside Maya's apartment. The city was painted in amber light. The air smelled of fallen leaves and dinner from a nearby kitchen. Layla chased a paper airplane down the steps, laughing as it landed in a swirl of red and gold. Maya sat on the edge of the porch, mug in hand, watching her daughter run. Alex sat beside her, elbows on his knees, quiet. They didn't need to fill the silence. The space between them had grown into something tender, familiar, like the pause between notes in a song that no longer needed to prove it was music. Finally, Alex spoke. I never thought there'd be room for anyone else in my life, he said. His voice was low, roughened by truth rather than regret. Maya turned to him. The sun caught the edge of his profile, the faint lines around his mouth, the calm that had replaced the old restlessness. And I, she said softly, never thought anyone would dare to stay. He looked at her, something breaking open in his gaze. Then I guess we both ran out of excuses, he murmured. She smiled, faint but real. Maybe that's what healing looks like. Layla's laughter echoed across the yard. A gust of wind scattered the leaves into tiny spirals, dancing around her small figure. She twirled beneath them, shouting, Look, Mama, it's raining colors. Maya laughed. The sound full and unguarded. Alex lifted his camera again but didn't take a photo. Some moments, he'd learned, were too sacred to capture. He just really looked at the two of them. This was his life now. Not headlines, not stock tickers, just this light and sound, and the quiet heartbeat of belonging. As the sun dipped lower, the air cooled. Maya pulled her cardigan tighter. Alex stood, then crouched to pick up one of Layla's fallen leaves, a red maple, its edges gold in the fading light. Funny, he said, twirling it between his fingers. How something can let go and still be beautiful. Maya watched him. That's because it's not the falling that matters, she said. It's what the wind does with you after. He looked up at her then, and in that look there was everything they hadn't said all year, every apology, every forgiveness, every quiet morning that had slowly taught them how to trust again. Do you still think about the desert? She asked softly. Sometimes. He admitted. But now, when I do, it's not just the faces I see. It's what came after. The people who showed me how to live again. She nodded. You've changed. So have you. They fell silent again, hands finding each other without thought, fingers intertwining the way they always did when words felt too small. There was no grand declaration, no cinematic promise, only presence. And maybe that was enough. Layla came running toward them, cheeks flushed, breathless. "Mommy, Uncle Alex. Look." She opened her palms, revealing a handful of leaves shaped like hearts. Maya laughed. "You found those?" "They found me," Layla said proudly. Alex smiled. Of course they did. He helped her climb onto the porch, settling her between them. She leaned against his shoulder, half asleep before the sun was even gone. Maya watched her daughter's eyes flutter closed. "She adores you. She reminds me what forgiveness looks like," he said. "And me?" Maya asked quietly. He turned, meeting her eyes. "You remind me what staying feels like." Her breath caught. For a moment, it was as if the whole world had gone still, the kind of stillness that feels like safety, not absence. She reached for his hand again, and he let his thumb brush against her skin. "Alex," she whispered, "I don't know what comes next." "Neither do I," he said. "But I'm not afraid of finding out." The light dimmed. Street lamps flickered on, one by one, casting halos over the sidewalk. Inside the apartment, the smell of soup simmering filled the air. Something simple, something shared. Maya leaned her head on his shoulder. He stayed perfectly still, not wanting to disturb the moment, as if moving might break the fragile miracle of it. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked quietly. He smiled, eyes on the horizon. "I used to think fate was what found you. Now I think it's what you choose not to let go." She closed her eyes, letting the words settle, and when she finally spoke, her voice was soft but certain. "Then stay." "I already am," he said. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and wood smoke. Layla stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about flying leaves. Alex pressed a kiss to her hair, then looked up at Maya. The sunset caught in her eyes, turning them to gold. He said, quietly, "Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't finding the right person." She smiled faintly. "Then what is it?" "Not letting them go once you do." Maya's breath trembled, but her voice was steady. "Then we'll stay." And in that small, unremarkable porch in Brooklyn, beneath a sky turning to fire, two people who had once been broken found something they didn't think existed anymore. Peace that didn't ask to be proven. Later that night, when the house was still, Maya stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The world was ordinary again, and that felt like grace. Love hadn't come to save her. It had simply chosen to stay. Love isn't a miracle that rescues you. It's the courage to remain when the storm has passed, when the noise is gone, when all that's left is truth. If someone once pulled you out of silence, don't be afraid to let them in, because sometimes, from the smallest moment the seat beside you, on a flight, a voice in a storm, the rest of your life begins to write itself anew. Years later, when the world had gentled into middle age, autumn returned to Brooklyn the same way it always did, soft, amber, and full of echoes. Layla was 16 now. The apartment felt smaller, the ceilings lower, the air still carrying the faint scent of cinnamon and books. Maya's laughter filled it less often these days. Alex's had grown quieter with time, worn smooth like sea glass. One rainy Saturday, while clearing the attic for storage, Layla found a cardboard box marked Old Winters. Inside were faded journals, a few hospital newsletters, and a single photograph, sealed in a plastic sleeve. She pulled it out. Her mother and her, years ago. Standing in a schoolyard, Maya's hair caught in the wind. Layla mid-spin, her sweater the color of sunlight, and behind the camera's invisible lens, she knew who stood there. Alex. At the bottom, in small handwriting she recognized from his old notes, were 4 words. Proof that joy exists. Layla stared at it for a long time. The edges had yellowed, but the moment was alive, bright, effortless. The kind of happiness that never tries to explain itself. From downstairs came the sound of dishes clinking, her mother humming faintly to some forgotten song, and then Alex's voice, deeper now, slower, asking if she wanted tea. Layla smiled. She ran her thumb across the glossy surface, tracing the lines of her mother's face, the softness around her eyes. She realized she'd never actually seen this version of her parents before the steadiness, before the years carved their quiet peace. This was the beginning, she thought. The first landing after all the storms. She carried the photo downstairs. Maya was at the table, sorting through bills. Alex stood by the stove, stirring something that smelled like rosemary and comfort. The light through the window painted them in gold and gray, the kind of light that felt like a heartbeat. "Where did you find that?" Maya asked, recognizing it instantly. "In a box." Layla said, "You never told me about it." Maya smiled, glancing at Alex. "Some stories don't need telling. They just keep happening." Alex turned off the stove, drying his hands. "That photo was the first time I believed in tomorrow," he said quietly. Layla looked at them, the way their eyes found each other in the stillness. Not as people who'd conquered anything, but as two who had chosen to remain. And for the first time, she understood. That night, after dinner, she framed the photograph and placed it on the mantel. Not because it was perfect, but because it was true. The 3 of them sat by the window as rain began again, steady, familiar. Maya leaned her head on Alex's shoulder. Layla rested against her mother's side. No words, no promises, just the sound of rain, the rhythm of belonging. In the reflection on the glass, the photograph shimmered faintly in the lamplight, the past folded neatly into the present. And somewhere between the falling rain and the slow, steady breath of those who stayed, life continued, not rewritten, not redeemed, simply lived.